There he is, Knowles.
There you are.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Now I got you.
Now you've got me.
All
Speaking,
right.
the eczema comment was no joke. I was out at the beach over this weekend.
Yeah.
And of course, look, I have bronze Sicilian skin, so I don't usually lather up the sunscreen.
Right.
And I am just a blister.
You really were out there. You really
I'm a
did
human blister right now. So fortunately for the entire audience, nobody can see that right now. Past the paywall, and I'm wearing clothing.
In fact, just imagining it is worse than I do. It's fun. I have this too. Mine are a desert people, and so I go out and I think I don't need sunscreen. But now I've just got spray. I hate that gum.
Oh yeah.
So I just spray myself every time I go out, and it's just a hail of disgusting stuff. Let's talk about Scooter Libby. Remind people who Scooter Libby is and how he got in trouble in the first place.
Well, it all goes back to James Comey. It actually does. It
does
goes
it
back
really?
to.
That's right. It does.
It does.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because in 2003, James Comey was the Deputy Attorney General, and this was the first time he royally screwed something up. There was the Valerie Plame scandal, and he appoints a special counsel to invest. Blah 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 blah. And Scooter Libby was Dick Cheney's chief of staff to the Vice President of the United States. There was something called the Valerie Plame affair. It basically only existed in the mainstream media, in the imagination and fever dreams of the mainstream media.
It existed to attack George W. Bush because George W. Bush was right about something.
It's because he was right and because he didn't have actual scandals, so they had to gin this one up.
Yep.
It basically all happened because Valerie Plame was a covert CIA operative. She was married to Joseph Wilson, who was a former diplomat. And so Wilson went on a fact-finding mission to investigate whether Saddam Hussein was trying to get uranium from Niger. He comes back and writes an op-ed in the New York Times and said, absolutely not, he wasn't doing that, and one of these reasons for the Iraq War just wasn't true. Turns out that op-ed was not true. Saddam Hussein absolutely was trying to get uranium from Niger. This was widely accepted by the international intelligence agencies and the U.S. intelligence agencies. We know the only other explanation for a 1999 high-level Iraqi trip to Niger would be that they were, I don't know, just on vacation or something. Niger doesn't export anything. It's just uranium. We know that this is true. By anyone who has even looked into this for 8 minutes, that is now accepted.
Now,
but it didn't. Yeah.
Just to break in here, people have to remember, because people don't remember, or they're too young to remember, that the press hated George W. Bush. They say, oh, it's all about Trump. It's all about Trump. No, Trump is different. Trump is different. Well, maybe Trump is different, but they hated him. And the idea that the New York Times had run an op-ed and had got him and then got wrong-footed drove them insane. So you just have to put that in context. This is not new with the press. They hate Republicans no matter who they are.
I know it's confusing because now they love George W. Bush. They they always love the last Republican.
The last Republican, that's right.
They always really love him. But the anti-Bush hysteria was just as bad as the anti-Trump hysteria in most ways. People forget about that now. So they thought they had him. They were so excited that they had him, and they were wrong. They were just dead wrong about it. So at a certain point, the covert CIA identity of Wilson's wife, Valerie Plame, is leaked.
It was a columnist basically saying, he just mentioned it as he was proving that George W. Bush was right.
That's right.
He mentioned Valerie Plame's name. Yeah.
Novak, writing in the Washington Post, referenced this her position with the CIA, and this became a big scandal. Now, this is where Comey comes in. Comey, as Deputy Attorney General, appoints a special counsel, Patrick Fitzgerald, to investigate all of these nefarious dealings, because the Democrats were hoping that the White House leaked it as retribution for Wilson's op-ed. There are a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah.
But if you look even slightly beyond the surface, none of that holds up. The White House didn't have to get back at Wilson for anything. Wilson got it wrong. the truth validated the White House.
Right.
So there's an investigation into all of this. Scooter Libby, who was the only guy who was sentenced to prison and fined for this whole thing, was never even indicted. He was never indicted for it because it was absurd to think that he leaked it. He did not leak it. We know that he did not. We actually know who did leak Valerie Plame's information, and it was Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage.
So it had nothing to do with Cheney, right? And that was the big one.
It didn't have anything to do with the White House.
Yeah,
he was at the State Department.
Right.
And so Richard Armitage, who by the way, opposed the Iraq War.
That's right. He opposed the Iraq War.
He opposed the Iraq War. He had no reason to to get revenge on Wilson or on Valerie Plame. It just came out, as these things do. People don't know what's covert, what isn't covert. So we know that Richard Armitage leaked it. He never went to jail. He was never sentenced to anything. They get Scooter Libby because they wanted to get the White House. They got him on a procedural crime of making conflicting statements to investigators and this, that, and the other thing. He had absolutely nothing to do with Plame. He gets sentenced to a $250,000 fine and 2.5 years in jail.
So very similar to what happened to Mike Flynn in this Russian collusion investigation. No Russian collusion. They haven't found a thing, but they got a couple of guys who made conflicting statements.
Right.
And when they say to you, you lied to the FBI, you've got to decide whether you're going to face a long time in prison or you're going to plead guilty and get a deal. I mean, that's what you have to do.
That's exactly right. And they're going to squeeze him. And look, you can indict a ham sandwich.
Right.
And they basically said, look, we're going to get you. We're going to get you for something. So we thought we were going to get you on this. Obviously, that didn't happen at all. And actually, we already knew from Richard Armitage that he was the guy who leaked it. But you're going to jail, buddy. So George W. Bush at the time, despite Dick Cheney begging him to pardon Scooter Libby, as he should have done, George Bush said, no, well, he did do this little procedural crime, and so I'll commute his sentence, but I won't pardon him.
Right.
Donald Trump just pardoned Scooter Libby, justice prevailing 11 years late. And I got to tell you something. I like George W. Bush. I think in many ways he was a good leader and a moral guy. This was a moral miscalculation on the part of George W. Bush. And crazy as it sounds, this was an absolutely correct moral judgment made by Donald Trump. Justice finally prevails 11 years later, 11 years too late.
Well, it is kind of like an Aesop fable of why Trump is in the White House in a way, because the fact that George W. Bush was so in love with maintaining the honor of the office. And remember, Bill Clinton had dragged the office of the presidency through the muck. I mean,
right.
People used to think, conservatives used to talk about how Ronald Reagan wouldn't remove his jacket and tie when he was in the Oval Office because that's how much he respected it, where Bill Clinton was removing his pants in the Oval Office.
He was building human humidors. There were a lot of things going on. A lot of things.
Exactly. And so, George W. Bush, for conservatives, came in with a mandate to restore the dignity of the office. But in doing this, and not pardoning Scooter Libby for this completely created scandal, a scandal that actually didn't exist, because Valerie Plame was not like out there in the field, like the girl on Homeland, arresting terrorists. She was already basically back home, and she was not. It was not endangering anybody. So for this completely meaningless leak, they developed the scandal simply to silence the fact that George W. Bush was right.
That's
he
right.
was right. And so it really is. It shows you why conservatives are fed up. Now, they actually made a movie about this. I've only seen bits and pieces of it. What was it called?
Fair Game.
Right.
It's this movie with Naomi Watts and Sean Penn. That's just Sean Penn. That should tell you all you need to know about the movie, shouldn't it?
But suddenly she was like, Naomi Watts, a beautiful and talented actress, and suddenly that's Valerie Plame, and she's a big spy, basically.
Right. Basically everything in the movie is untrue, and the movie also covers up the fact that George Bush was right, that the intelligence was right. And it gets a little confusing because there was some disinformation from about Niger to try to discredit this trip, to try to discredit Saddam Hussein from Saddam Hussein trying to get uranium from Niger. There were forged documents and all of that. But the actual facts on the ground that Saddam Hussein wanted uranium from Niger, that was correct. The movie glides right over that, says no way. And this is what the left always does. When they can't have the facts on their side, which is frequently, they create fantasies in Hollywood. That's all people will remember. I mean, even for me, I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican, I remember this scandal, I've read a lot about this scandal. Some of the facts they're a little confusing, you have to check some dates. People are going to remember the movie JFK, where it wasn't a communist who was some right-wing conspiracy. They're going to remember Fair Game. These are the guys who are writing history. It is a real assault on history, and it's a way that the left always wins the culture.
This is, Joseph Wilson, the guy who wrote the original op-ed, right? He wrote the original op-ed, and he hadn't really done any investigation. And they said to him, nobody's going to go see a movie, Fair Game, about this scandal. And this is a direct quote. This is what Joseph Wilson said. He said, for people who have short memories or don't read, this is the only way they will remember the period. And they do it all the time. I mean, this is what it means to control the narrative. It's just, even if you get it wrong in the moment, you can get it wrong by making a movie about it that is the only thing, as he said, that people will remember. Because, I mean, even as we're talking about it, right, it's a minor, weird story. Who can remember where Scooter Libby was? And, who can even remember the vice president half the time? I mean,
right.
We remember Dick Cheney because we loved him, but like still, like who can remember these things? But it is exactly what has happened to Donald Trump. It is this absolute barrage between the bureaucracy, which is like a sort of a system for rejecting anybody who tries to come and get it. It's like I'm trying to think, immunities, an immune system that says that we will kill you if you come and try and fire us. But it's also the press and Hollywood backing them up. And this is why when we complain about this stuff, this is why, because they win history even when they lose the truth.
I told you, I got to meet Scalia a couple times before he died. We asked him, what do you think is the greatest threat to American liberty? He said, the headless, unaccountable bureaucracy.
Really?
The self-perpetuating bureaucracy. And other reasonable people might say, well, the press. The press is really lying and covering up for people. And what we see now is that the press, the mainstream media, utterly one-sided, are lying and covering up for the bureaucracy. I mean, that is a really unholy alliance, and it's a real threat to liberty.
It's really hilarious to me when I think of all the flack that J. Edgar Hoover got for being a dishonest FBI guy who would come to you. He would come to you and say, yeah, you don't want to do that because we have documents on you that show you were with Russian hookers, so you don't want to do what you want to do what I want to do. It's hilarious to me to see journalists, so-called, saying, oh, wow, you don't want to destroy the people's trust in the FBI. And my feeling is, wait, you're a journalist. That is your job
to
destroy.
You see this from a certain brand of conservative who doesn't like Donald Trump, too. All of a sudden, the federal bureaucracy is this sacrosanct, wonderful. Are you kidding me? What are you thinking?
Bill Kristol said, if I have to choose between the deep state and the Trump state, I'll choose the deep state. And my feeling is everything you say after that sentence is meaningless.
Well, have you looked at his Twitter timeline recently? Fair prediction.
So you and I are both walking out of this building after this and going on a trip. I'm going to Grand Canyon University in Phoenix to talk about Christianity and the culture. Where are you going?
I was gonna speak at the University of Phoenix. I thought, the online one, and I don't know, I haven't got my invitation. No, I'm going to Alabama. I'm going to speak at the Alabama Policy Institute in Mobile, which should be a lot of fun. And then on Thursday, I'm going to Trump University itself, the University of Pennsylvania. I'll be speaking in John Huntsman Hall. He's the ambassador to Russia. I will be colluding with the Russian ambassador, and the speech will be on the topic, reasons to vote for Trump.
There you go. This is the place where he learned all the best words. So.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to be a real, come on, maybe I'll have a little art of the deal with the protesters. We'll see how it goes.
All right. Michael Knowles' show is coming up, and we will talk to you when you get back.
All right, see you, Drew.
All right.